everyone. Today, we will be talking about social groups. It is in our nature as humans to socialize and interact with other human beings around us. Relationships are formed when one interacts with those around him. So human groups together based on different variables as racial background, hobbies, interest, intelligence, and etc. These groups are what we call social groups.
A social group is defined as two or more people who feel they belong to the same social category and share a common social identity. Therefore, a social group can be defined with a shared understanding that each member of the group feels like they belong. A social group is a unit of interacting personalities with interdependence of rules and statuses existing between and among themselves. It is a collection of people who interact with each other in accordance with the position they occupy in the society. Social groups are distinguished from aggregates by this common understanding which is known as social identification. When a group of people congregate at a location at the same time, it's referred to as an aggregate rather than a social group. For instance, a group of people waiting at a bus stop may have common identity, but they may not consider themselves to be members of a group.
Categories are collections of people that need to be distinguished from social groups due to the fact that they are made up of individuals who have similar traits throughout space and time. Similar traits include race and gender. Yet again, what set apart members of one social group from members of another category was the sense of belonging among the participation. The following are the examples of a social group: clubs, business, families, circles of friends, local religious congregations, and fraternity and sorority chapters. Now we are going to tackle two types of social group. So there are two types of social group: secondary and primary group. Primary groups are long-lasting, direct, and intimate relationships. For example, family and church community. Primary groups are important in our lives. They are small and closely knit, associated with a strong sense of belonging. When people belong to this kind of group, they are emotionally connected to the group as the whole serves as their common identity. Strong emotion, bonds, close and reciprocal interactions, and endurance over time are its defining characteristics. Members of these groups strongly identify with the group and treat one another with respect and care. They have a big impact in our lives because they are the first groups we become part of. A few examples would be the typically family, a small circle of close friends, or a lover.
Primary groups ideally give us emotional warmth, comfort, and support, providing us an identity and a strong sense of loyalty and belonging. It is what shapes us to the person we are and will be. However, primary groups aren't always perfect. In other cases, these groups can be setting for physical and sexual violence, as well as emotional and mental abuse. The trust and loyalty involved in such groups makes individuals or members vulnerable, which can be targeted by people with ill intentions. The following are the examples of primary groups: families, friends, peers, neighbors, classmates, sororities, fraternities, and church members. Meanwhile, secondary groups gather to achieve a specific and shared goal to have common interests. For example, social clubs, political parties, and class groups.
In this type of group, the common interest shared amongst the individuals is the shared goals or interests, in which the members are rarely, if ever, in face-to-face contact with each other. So in other words, secondary groups are large, impersonal organizations whose members are more closely related to one another through a common activity or objective than by sentimental bonds. People usually join considered a secondary group. When members of a secondary group get closer, they may merge into a primary group, which is composed of people who are emotionally connected rather than goal-oriented. Are the examples of a secondary group: study groups, sports teams, schoolmates, attorney-client, doctor-patient, and co-workers. The difference between primary groups and secondary groups is the kind of connections of the individuals inside the group. When people are emotionally attached to one another, what they're in is called a primary group. But when the individual groups inside the groups are connected because of a shared goal or objective, it's a secondary group. These are positive and negative effects of social group, and the following are: number one, presume a protection factor. The first advantage is obvious and has to do with a very material fact. Being part of a group makes it more difficult for us to expose ourselves to dangerous situations that can end us. Being surrounded by people you trust and have a connection makes it harder to encounter dangerous situations. Although not possible, it lowers the risk of it.
Number two, it provides us with role models. In addition, another advantage of being part of a group is that we constantly exposed to examples to follow. People who have similar characteristics and objectives to ours, and who are stimulating when orienting our actions towards a goal.
To strengthen our self-esteem. The feeling of belonging is one of the aspects that positively reinforce people's self-esteem. People who feel connected with you naturally care about you and your well-being, and will show support and love towards you. By being a part of a group, one can perceive themselves as an important and valuable member of a community and thus gain self-confidence. Number 4. Fight loneliness. Loneliness is one of the vital situations most related to harmful life habits and physical or psychological illness. By being part of a social group, we are able to combat loneliness because of the group providing a sense of belonging and support. Number 5. Provide us with information. Information is another resource and belonging to a group, with the possibility of contacting many people, is an important social capital.
Irrigation of contagion. Groups are means of contagion of epidemics. However, in modern societies, the fact of belonging to a group in which educate prevention measures are taken minimize this risk. Assuming that one may not be a part of a group at the same time relate to others. Effect of social pressure. Another of the disadvantages of belonging to a group is that the simple fact of being part of one exposes us more to group pressure, given that the rest of its members share certain characteristics with us, and through this identification and initiatives can be legitimized to create uniformity between individuals.
Criminalization of dissent. It is within the dynamics of the groups to use exemplary punishments against those who were previously part of the group and later adopted behaviors that are considered contrary to group identity.
4. Appearance of leadership by default. Another disadvantage of group membership is that if we do not strive to avoid it using democratic mechanisms, a leader appears who has more power than the rest in decision making and role sharing, regardless of his or her degree of skill in handling the task to be addressed collectively. This means that someone who does not have the proper skills may become a leader and lead the group to the bad situations. 5. Outward confrontation. The feeling of belonging has several degrees of intensity, and at the most extreme cases, it can legitimize hostility towards those who are not part of the group. Just by being outside its limits, hostility may come in physical form or verbal.